So the way that we view ourselves is like what Deel did for global payroll compliance, we're going to do for global revenue-based compliance. We want to help with all the forms of compliance that a business will run into when they sell internationally, right? So that isn't just indirect tax though. Like indirect tax is a big part of it, but there are these other things that businesses need to figure out when they sell internationally. There are things like, withholding tax. There is things like input tax, which is the tax you pay on expenses. There's things like e-invoicing, tariffs, which are obviously super topical because of Trump. These are all things that businesses need when they expand internationally, and that is where our focus is right now. We're not looking at like the other areas of compliance, like what Vanta focuses on, like GDPR. We want to focus on the compliance around selling.
Hey everyone, welcome to the Founders in Arms podcast with me, Immad, co-founder and CEO of Mercury.
And I'm Raj Suri, co-founder of Lima and Tribe. And today we have with us Nicholas Rudder, co-founder and CEO of Sphere. Welcome, Nicholas.
Thanks very much. Happy to be here.
So you and I have known each other for a while. I met you right out of Y Combinator, right? You did which year did you do Y Combinator?
Yeah, so I did YC in W22. So it was about 3-4 years ago now. And that was a very different business at the time. And you came in then, and I guess you've come with me on the journey to what is now Sphere.
Yeah, exactly. It's been a crazy journey. And so why don't you give us a quick recap? Immad, this is the first time you're meeting him, right? So it's been a really interesting journey to follow. And I know you have a big announcement as well today. So would love to, talk us about the journey and the announcement as well.
Sure thing. Yeah, so when I joined in for the W22 batch, basically we built this business in the UK and we moved over to SF because of YC. And we were building an online EdTech marketplace. It was this platform that would allow like instructors from around the world to teach courses to professionals in businesses. So it was like to upskill in certain technical areas. And long story short is EdTech is a really tough market. We had made some assumptions that didn't end up being true, and that business didn't end up working. But we then went through this process of like pivoting, and there's a whole sort of bunch of stories there, and it can go into it. Eventually we ended up going on this path that was more aligned with my background. Anyway, so I come from a finance background, and we'd experienced this issue with tax compliance in the prior marketplace, and so did a very strong, hard pivot into a different direction. All while, I guess, being in the same entity, actually, we had convinced investors to sort of go with us on this journey. And now we're Sphere with this AI-powered cross-border compliance marketplace. We just raised 21 million from Andreessen Horowitz. And I can tell you a lot more about that in the podcast.
Congrats on the raise. I guess I'm trying to understand tax compliance exactly, what exactly it means. So maybe it'll be good to talk through one of your companies. You've got Lovable's logo. How does Lovable use Sphere?
Yeah. So the way that it works is basically we help a company like Lovable with getting registered in the right jurisdictions around the world. And this is, just to backtrack, this is specifically, we do a particular type of compliance, which is indirect tax. It's the tax on top of your transactions. So sales tax in the US, VAT in Europe, GST in Australia, changes depending on where you are. And so, for a company like Lovable, we will help them get registered with the tax authority. We will help them calculate the right tax at the point of transaction. So either in an invoice or a checkout. We'll help them file the right tax returns, and we'll help remit tax payments to the tax authorities at the end of each period.
Gotcha. When did you pivot to this?
So after YC, we were working on the initial business, Scholar Site, for about a year and a half. And we basically stopped that business at the end of 2023. 2024, I started working on Sphere, and there was a whole year where we were in stealth and We were building a lot of the core infrastructure around it. And we only really came to market in earlier this year, in 2025.
So it's been a bit of a rocket ship to get to kind of 21 million Series A. I don't know if you're releasing any stats or anything, but what's interesting is like this feels like a space where there's a lot of companies. Like I've been hearing about like tax. I think even Stripe has like a Stripe tax API or something like that. So I guess like how do you enter a space that's like pretty busy, and yeah, how do you even know there's a space there when when it feels like there's so many other companies kind of operating there?
Yeah, so I think like this goes back to, I guess, the story of what happened like during the pivot. I think when we stopped the last business, as I said, we had this issue with the last marketplace. And so marketplaces actually feel this issue with tax quite acutely, because you've got to calculate tax on the whole GMV on your platform. You're liable for it, right? And so we had a lot of issues there. We had a lot of issues with the US states, had a lot of issues with different countries. And so when I sort of decided what I was going to do in the next business, I wanted to go back to my like finance roots, which was I had worked at PwC, worked at Macquarie Bank, and I was centered around this thesis of like, how do you help companies expand internationally by removing a lot of this cross-border compliance out of the equation? And it was really sort of based off that prior pain that I had and some of the prior sort of career experience I had as well. And so I started going down that path. And like, the thing that we'd done prior when we were in that pivot hell journey is we were thrashing about into all different directions, into areas that were hot that we knew nothing about. But this was something that I like actually knew about. And so when I started asking like these heads of finance, these CFOs, I was basically treated it like a sales process. I was, doing a lot of discovery calls with these CFOs at reputable software companies, asking them like, what are the big issues when you expand globally? And the thing that just kept coming up, which was the same as the pain I had previously, was this issue of indirect tax. And I think where I started to get real conviction around it was after, a whole bunch of the discovery calls. I started putting together a high-fidelity Figma prototype, and I was able to close 5 contracts just off that Figma prototype. And I think that was the point where it was like, right, there's
like you
something
closed
here.
5 paid contracts off a Figma prototype?
Yeah.
And you told these
basically.
people like, hey, it's not ready, but I'll build it if you pay for it. Is that the idea?
Not even, to be honest. I sort of had made it so high fidelity that it almost came across as it was a real product. And basically...
Wait, so how long did you have to actually build the product after you sold it?
So then after that, we sort of brought on those 5 as design partners. And so like some of the early folks, were understanding that we were building things out over time. And the good thing about this is that you could sort of do it region by region, because like you're not going to go do tax compliance over every region globally from day one. And so, yeah, we basically, they saw the vision, they saw the product of it. We built it together with them. And then we kept selling on that Figma prototype for quite a while, actually. It was only until one call where we'd already had like 10 or 15 customers at that point, where a CFO just destroyed me on a live call and basically asked me to start clicking into things. I was like, no, click into this button, click into this button. And he basically said like, look, I know this is a Figma prototype. Like, I'm not going to buy. I bet you a bunch of other people did know as well. But maybe they just were too polite to say anything. And
I feel like this is often a thing that people say you should do, like sell the thing before you make it, have a contract. But it's rare to actually come across someone who kind of nailed that strategy. It sounds like getting a really high fidelity Figma prototype was one part of it. Was there something else? Like, was the need so extreme that people were willing to kind of be design partners? Like, what other things do you think like led to the fact that this worked as a strategy?
Yeah, and I do want to also just say, like, I didn't really have a choice around this being, a high fidelity prototype, because I'm a non-technical founder. I needed to have conviction that this is the right thing to build before I invested in like getting engineers on board and sort of building this thing out. And so, yeah, I guess like I didn't really have any other options but to do that. In terms of like why I think people were receptive to coming on board early was a few things. I think firstly is, yeah, first, one of the big things we saw when we chatted to all these CFOs and heads of finance out there was that no one was doing international well. Like even the players that were out there right now were all outsourcing the international functionality to local service partners or last mile providers. And that was like a really shitty experience for customers. They basically had to, you know, do a lot of things manually with these service partners. They had to manage a lot of third-party contracts. They had to pay extra for those service partners too. And so, you know, for us, we were doing it like natively. We were building these direct integrations into the tax authorities. And so that was something they hadn't seen before, and they were willing to take a risk on that because it would have saved them a whole bunch of time and cost.
Actually, there's a whole backstory as well, right? Like Immad doesn't know. I mean, your co-founder left, right? Your CTO co-founder left. There's another thing I know that really was difficult for you. I mean, you guys have like complementary skills, and why don't you tell us about that?
Yeah, so I think the whole story behind this is a very personal one, and like, yeah, at the time at which the last business failed, and we decided to do this pivot. You know, it was probably one of the most turbulent points of my life. Like at the time at which it happened, about a month after doing a lot of the different thrashing around and different ideas, my co-founder had left. And he was someone that I knew from back home, decided to go back to his family business. He was my technical co-founder. And it really was then a point where I had to convince investors, like, look, I've still got this. Like, I know the direction I'm going in. I know there's a big opportunity there.
How much money did you have left?
We had a lot of the money we had raised from the seed round still left. We didn't spend much on the last business. So it was effectively like I was starting with a seed round in the bank. But at the same time as all this stuff happening, which was incredibly stressful, my wife became pregnant with twins, and they were basically identical twins. Probably the rarest type of twin. It's called a mono twin. It's basically where it's a very high risk pregnancy. I won't go into all the details, but basically that was happening, and our US health insurance refused to cover us at the time. So we basically had to leave the country and go to the UK, and you have to sort of take these twins out early, 2 months before they're due. And so we were living in this hospital in Oxford, all while the business was getting off the ground, like calling tax authorities, selling the Figma prototypes. And I think, you know, that was probably one of the hardest things. And it was also about like bringing the team on at that time. It was just an immense amount of stress, and luckily we came out the other side, and we're now back in the US. But yeah, it was very tough at the time.
So you had a major pivot, like a completely, you know, change in companies, co-founder leaving, and like, you know, first kids, but they're twins, you know, high risk pregnancy and have to leave the country. So you basically got a, you know, quarter effect of issues at the same time. It's
what made you keep going? I mean, I think a lot of other people would have been like, "Hey, let's just return the money and go get a job or something." Like, what kind of kept you in the game?
I think there were two main things. It was firstly that I wanted to prove to the people that sort of vanished in thin air when the last business failed. I wanted to prove to them that I could do this. I wanted to prove to myself that I could do it. So it was very much like a chip on the shoulder thing. Like, you know, as much as people maybe don't like to describe that, it was for me. And it was like, I'm going to fucking make this work.
Like, was it like investors, employees, like all of that?
It was all of the above. It was investors, it was advisors who are, you know, going to say they were going to be there with you when the times got tough, and like literally 1% of them stayed. And I remember, like, Raja, you were one of those people that were there when it got really tough. And you gave me some good perspective at the time. And you were like, literally, you won't even remember those people. Like, you know, just keep your head down, and like, you'll get out the other side and you'll laugh about it one day. And yeah, I think I felt a lot of guilt when it had failed. And so I had called up all my existing investors to say, you know, explain the situation. But yeah, I think that was definitely one thing. I think the other big thing, which kept me going, was that I didn't really have a choice. So I had no money in the bank at all. I was getting all these bills for hospital expenses, like we were going to go bankrupt, and I was backed into a corner, and I had no other way but to fight my way out. Like there was no other option at the time. And so, I'm sort of still in that boat anyway, but yeah.
Yeah, man. Yeah, that's the journey, man. Yeah, you're it's very tough in those early stages. But yeah, proud of you that you were able to keep fighting. I think that says a lot about you. That's actually the toughest skill, of being a founder. Once you're able to do that, like that skill lasts for a lifetime. Yeah.
I think what also is good is that, like, when you go through that level of intensity and pressure, you also come out the other end thinking, like, what your endurance is. And I think you also feel like, you can run the race longer than any other founder that you're competing with. So I think there's a comfort to that as well. Like, that you'll be able to, nothing's going to be as bad as that low point that you had in the past.
I think that's also like something we do to ourselves as founders. We like convince ourselves there's no choice but to succeed. Like there probably was other choices, right? And I think other people might have taken other choices. But yeah, my last company, we did 4 pivots and like we went for 8 years. And at any one of those points, like, we were 100% convinced like we had to make it work. There was like no other choice. It was like existential, not just to the company, but to our life to like make that company work. And in hindsight, it probably wasn't. But that's just kind of how we approached it.
I think the good founders, I think, have like this burn the ship, burn the boats approach. Like they get to the island, they're like, we got to make this work, right? And there's no other choice because they've, especially, one thing that struck me about Nicholas is how much cared about everyone who had invested in the company and like, been part of it and supported him. And like, he really cared. He really, really cared. And I've had people I've invested in, you probably had to, they just disappear. You never hear about them ever again, right? And I don't even know if some of the companies I've invested in are still around. Like I have no idea, right? So, but Nicholas was not like that. He was like very on top of it and the whole time. And like, and so, yeah, very, very communicative and also he cared. You could tell he cared a lot, right? And I think a lot of people who start companies nowadays, especially, people start companies sometimes because they can't find jobs, and so they're just like, I'm just going to do this. But Nicholas, you also have this immigrant mentality, right? You came from Australia, you left your life behind there. I mean, that's another thing that I think speaks, I think is highly correlated with success. Is once you're willing to do that, you're like, I got to make it, in this new country, right?
Yeah, and I think like the other thing, which potentially is a bit unhealthy, but I just think like people always talk about like, oh, you should separate the work from your life, but like, when you're a founder, like your startup is so inextricably linked to you. Like it's a manifestation of your personality. And so you take it so personally when it doesn't work. And and you just feel like a lot of this guilt or whatever. And I think you're just going to do everything in your power to make sure that it works. And I think like the fact that I did go through that and now I'm not, by no means are we sort of, succeeding. Like we're doing okay. We've obviously raised this round. It's a good milestone and should definitely acknowledge that. But I know how bad it was and like I don't ever want to go back to that. So I think it just makes me want to fight for it more. But yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I guess one piece of advice I'd give you is, don't spend all the money and try to get to like not necessarily profitability, but like at least default alive. I think it's like when you've been at the edge and from that on if this point onwards, you always like at least feel like you can get to default alive. It's like definitely like way lower stress.
Yeah. We're working towards it.
Yeah. And it sounds like Nicholas, you also sounds like a great sales guy, right? Like it's pretty uncommon for like, do you have a co-founder at this point? Like what's your technical team at this point?
No, so look, if I had found the perfect co-founder, the co-founder would be with me. I was not against co-founders. I very much like would have liked one, but I wasn't going to wait on this opportunity because I knew it was there right there and then. And like, you've got to be fast on this. And so I set off on this journey as a solo founder, and actually there was this advantage I found of being a solo founder, which was that I could give really high quality founding engineers, like a small team of founding engineers, more equity to entice them right into the business. And so I have 4 or 5 like really high quality founding engineers that I was able to bring on to give more equity. And like, I think that's harder when you have, 2 or more co-founders, because like the equity pool is smaller. And so, yeah, I think I was lucky in that way. I built a sort of core engineering team around me. There's only, even now, like I'm the only non-engineer. It's a very sort of engineering focused business. And yeah, that's sort of how I got it kicked off. And I think that's sort of an advantage against the classic YC mentality, which is just like, oh, you must have a co-founder at all costs. I understand the advantages of a co-founder, don't get me wrong, but I didn't have that choice. So
yeah, well, you got to play whatever cards you're dealt. You got to make the most of them, right? I'm interested in hearing your take on like what's so hard about EdTech. I think VCs often say like, EdTech is hard to fund, and but like, what is actually hard about it?
Here's what the issue was in our business, right? And I would make a bet that it's applicable to other EdTech businesses as well. But the thing is that, like, in our business, we had made this assumption that it would be easy for the marketplace to, provide functionality that would allow instructors to come onto the platform and create courses themselves that would sell to the masses, right? And that like it would be great, and people would come around the world. You create the supply and the demand would come. But the problem is that people don't know how to make good courses and good educational content. And so you have to become very involved in helping create that content. And what that leads to is you become a media business and a content business. And that's not a scalable business, right? So what happened was we just ended up, creating lots of courses because they were the only ones that would sell. If you left it up to the instructor, it would be crap, and no one would end up buying those seats. And we had sort of at the time been like, look, is this just the case with us? Like, are we not doing things right? So we chatted to all the competitors, and the competitors were like, look, none of us are making money. So we didn't want to spend the next 10 years of our life building something that really wasn't going to be a big business. It was also very like EdTech by definition is a vitamin, not a painkiller. And we definitely sensed that when we were selling it.
Yeah, makes sense. Do you think AI makes it better or worse? I mean, you could imagine creating a lot more content, but then I guess people can get content for free in other places.
I don't know. There's all this whole, promise in the EdTech space of, AI personalization and how like it will create content that's right for your learning needs. But I just don't think that the content that AI is producing, at least right now, is stuff that engages people. I mean, I haven't seen any breakout successes. I mean, I know there's Duolingo, but, there's other things that make that successful too. And it's probably, one of the outliers versus the key.
Yeah. And that's like a pre-AI company anyway.
Exactly. So I know that they're doing a lot of stuff with AI, but I just don't think we're in a place where it's going to move the needle enough just yet, but maybe that will change in time.
Okay, I have a question around Sphere. I do feel like it used to be the case that the internet was like global by default, right? You'd launch something and you could sell it anywhere and it would be accessible everywhere. Whereas, there's been a trend of this kind of balkanization of the internet where, everyone's got different laws. There's, obviously Europe has GDPR and, there's even like issues with like California law applying to California users. And so it's obviously you're kind of going after this kind of tax problem. But do you think in general, like the internet is just going to be a much less global place? Or do you think enough things like Sphere will exist that like, yes, like it gets harder, but there's enough tools that like enable people to expand globally from day zero?
Well, I think there's 2 things at play here. Like, firstly, businesses are not going to stop selling globally. Like, that is just going to happen more and more and more. Like with all these AI companies, like there's a stat out there that AI companies now by year 2 are selling into 90 plus countries, right? Like,
Oh,
and
wow.
that's only that was, I think 5 years ago, that was 40 countries. So it's like more than doubled, basically. So that is only going to increase. And we're going to see more and more of that. These businesses getting to 100 million because they're selling everywhere and anyone can come and swipe a credit card. Right. But then I think what you're referring to is like there's this other thing at play, which is there's these protectionist, regulatory things that are happening in the macro climate. And yes, it makes things more complex, but that is exactly why we exist. Like, I think all of those rules, like there've always been rules in every single jurisdiction. Okay, yes, there's things that are becoming more complex over time, but the rules are all out there. They're all in unstructured formats, in hard to find places, in different languages. And that's exactly what something like AI is really good at. It's like pattern matching those rules and applying it to the specific products of a business, right? And so I, strongly believe, otherwise I wouldn't be building Sphere, that like there is going to be a tool that is going to reduce that complexity, that is going to allow that first factor of like selling more aggressively globally to be more and more pronounced.
Do you think you're going to stick to taxes, or will you also do privacy laws and AI laws and all these other kind of...
No. So the way that we view ourselves is like what Deel did for global payroll compliance, we're going to do for global revenue-based compliance. We want to help with all the forms of compliance that a business will run into when they sell internationally, right? So that isn't just indirect tax, though. Like, indirect tax is a big part of it, but there are these other things that businesses need to figure out when they sell internationally. There are things like, withholding tax. There is things like input tax, which is the tax you pay on expenses. There's things like e-invoicing, tariffs, which are obviously super topical because of Trump. These are all things that businesses need when they expand internationally, and that is where our focus is right now. We're not looking at like the other areas of compliance, like what Vanta focuses on, like GDPR. We want to focus on the compliance around selling.
What was the most surprising thing to you about raising this A? Like, what was the most different thing compared to your seed, or was it like fairly similar process?
I would say that it was like fairly unintentional. We basically had a lot of interest from VCs, but we wanted to be like the classic YC approach. That's just like, don't talk to them. Like, just focus on building your product, and there'll be a time when we should engage. And I think, Andreessen had been pinging us for a while, and we were having an issue with our product, which out of nowhere suddenly came up in an email from Andreessen being like, "Oh, we can help you with this problem." And this was a problem I had communicated in my investor update. So Rajat, I'm not sure if you leaked this to Andreessen.
Not me.
And so they had this solution, and so then we engaged with them.
Like that, was it a real solution? Like they literally solved the problem?
It was a real solution. I can tell you what it was. It was like we were having an issue with a billing partner and integrating with them, right? And it was brought up in the investor update. And literally the next day, I get an email being like, "Hey, we know the CEO of this billing provider." And I was like, "Okay, that's random." But then I was like, "Timely."
Wow.
And so,
that's like pretty cool of Andreessen Horowitz to like go A, figure out the problem, and then B, have a solution and deliver it.
Yeah. So I mean, like I felt like at that point, like, okay, well, I've got to chat to them now. But I think after we chatted to them and some of the plans that we had and the similar businesses that they had helped, like Deel, like it made sense. So I would say like it was very different to the seed. The seed was like very structured. It was like, we are going to talk to investors in these 2 weeks before demo day, like get it done. And like there was a whole structure, but this was no structure. It was just, we didn't want to talk to anyone. We got roped into a conversation and like, full credit to them. They were amazing. And like, we love like our partner there. He's great. He's been super helpful. But it was just very quick. And, we were planning to do this fundraise at the end of this year, but it happened earlier.
So in hindsight, do you still agree with the YC feedback that like don't talk to VCs, or do you think actually it is?
I definitely do, because I think that what happened was we didn't talk to anyone, and I think a lot of the VCs were like, "Have you talked to Sphere?" No, we haven't talked to Sphere. Like, have you talked to Sphere? And I think like people were trying to chat to us, and I think we sort of, because of the fact we didn't talk to anyone, because they all talk to each other. So the minute one person talks to you talk to one of them, they're all going to share the information. And yeah, so I think it was good that we held out. I think it is very true what I see. It's such a distraction otherwise as well. Like, you should be just spending time selling and focusing on the product, not on doing investor chats. But yeah.
Yeah, I have a fund now, and I have someone working full time on the fund, and it is amazing how much he finds out. And like, we're a small fund, but really VCs are just like, so like, he's just like, oh yeah, blah 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 is raising right now, and like it is really like, I know people will say VCs talk, but they really really do talk. Like as soon as you're raising, basically, you should assume everyone knows you're raising, which is actually like I don't think most entrepreneurs like really internalize that. They think like, oh, I'll talk to these 3 VCs, and then if it doesn't work out, like I'll talk to some other VCs like after 4 weeks. But actually, all the VCs know you're raising, and you become stale like very quickly, which is the inverse of what you did.
I actually didn't know that. Yeah.
Yeah, you can. I think that's why it's like all about doing it in a short time period. Like there's the reverse FOMO is very real. Like you can become, if people think you've been raising for 4 weeks, then they're like, oh, everyone's already said no to this person. Like, why should I talk to them?
Yeah, exactly. Because then what happened was like when we did start talking to Andreessen, then others came in and it just became a very quick, tight process. And yeah, then we were able to close it quite quickly, which was great for us because we didn't want it to drag on.
I mean, I would say, obviously, it worked out for you. I think it's good to have like if you can really hold the line on having like casual relationship building meetings that are not pitch meetings. I think it is good. At least I every 6 to 9 months will go speak to like 10 VCs, and I've done that over like the last 5-6 years, and it's just like, I mean, at least for me, like I don't want to go like, this is the first time I've ever met this investor. Now I'm gonna like, for both sides actually, like you agreeing to like sign up with Andreessen Horowitz after like you've literally met them the first time and you're making this decision, and it's like gonna have 10 years of impact on your company. It's like, I'm sure you've made the right move with Andreessen Horowitz, but like in general, like it helps to like know each other.
But and Nicholas has another tactic, which we haven't explicitly talked about, is like having a good like seed investor base, or like a pre-seed base.
That's true.
That's kind of like cheering for him, that he's done a really good job of like communicating with, right? And like even through tough moments. And they kind of, somebody did, right? Somebody obviously said, hey, Andreessen, you should talk to these guys. And
that's funny that you never found out who it was.
I don't know. I should ask Mark actually. Mark Andreessen it's the second most famous Marco at Andreessen. But basically, I should ask him now that it's all done, who told him. I don't know. But yeah, I do think, like you said, Rajat, that was helpful. I think one thing I've been like militant on is sending an investor update out, even when it was like that very low point, like in the hospital or like at the pivot. And there was just like those updates were the worst thing to write, because it was just like, oh man, this is so shit. So I guess like, hopefully people respected that. And then when things started to go well, they were like, yeah, like, great. It's been a great comeback.
Yeah. As an investor, like, you get it, you care about the people you invest in and you want them to do well. And, I think, it is, because I've been on both sides of this, right? And it's like, sometimes you think like, will people, think bad of me, if things aren't going well, right? But we all know that, I mean, especially founders and people who've been through it, we all know the journey. It's like, sometimes things just don't go well, and we want to see how people react to that. And I think the way you reacted was really good.
But I think some people maybe who haven't gone through the founder journey, who are still in that investor seat, sometimes that can show. And so, yeah, it's true. Like when the founders are on the other side, like they get it.
That's why founders in arms.
Were you tempted to run this company in the UK? I mean, you had to go back because of kind of better healthcare, and presumably you have like some roots there, or were you just like completely dead set on doing it here?
No, so my wife is British, which she's a citizen there, and that we went back. We also, the quality of care there was so good. I have utmost respect for the NHS, but I have no interest in living in the UK anymore. I built the business there initially. It was just like such a stark contrast to see the startup ecosystem there versus in San Francisco. It's just not even comparable. I think it sort of suffers from a similar like problem as the Australian VC market, where it's like there's a collection of 3 or 4 good VCs, all the deal flows up to them, and they sort of can push pretty crappy terms onto founders. And so here in the US, that does not, well, I mean, obviously there's good investors.
Wait, it happens in Boston too. Trust me, I came from Boston. It's the exact same thing there. So it's only Silicon Valley, which is the opposite, you know?
Yeah, the competition is so great here from a VC perspective that they can't do that. And I think that's just much, much, much better for founders.
Yeah.
I guess that's just like, the investment terms. Is there other things about building a company here that, I did my first company in 2006 in the UK, and I felt, obviously this investor thing existed, and back then there was like basically only 2 good VCs. But there was also just like, the level of ambition that like UK entrepreneurs were going for was kind of just maybe 100x lower than like the Silicon Valley entrepreneurs at the time.
Well, that's on the more social and cultural side of things. Like everyone's come here for a reason, and pretty much everyone is doing startups, right? Like, okay, yes, there is big tech and blah, 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 but there's such a high concentration here that you're with other people that are thinking the same things, that are going through the same challenges, who are also like just super determined to be here. Like if they're here and they're an immigrant, like they're here to get the job done, right? Like, and I love that. Like there's such a energizing part of SF. If you ask my wife though, she'd be like, why the hell are we in SF? she wants to go live in Sydney. But yeah, for me, there's just no other place on the planet that is better for doing a startup than here. And that's my honest opinion.
Give it 10 years, eventually she'll be into SF. My wife also moved from the UK, and she was not into SF for a long time.
Yeah, well, we're 5 years in now. Hopefully it turns. But yeah, she still needs some convincing.
Move down to the peninsula. It's much nicer down here. That's why I was saying.
Well, yeah, she is pushing me to either go north, east, or south, but it's like, but then the commute is hectic, and like we're all in person here. So yeah, I don't know.
Well, one of the things that you mentioned about healthcare, I mean, one of the things I came from Canada, so we're all like from Commonwealth countries, right? So, but like I came here, one of the things that really shocked me about having a baby is like they send you a bill after having a baby. Like it's like a really large bill. It's like, so my first kid came early too. And I had a $500,000 bill. It was great. I mean, insurance paid for like all but 10,000 of it, but still, it's $10,000 bill. So it is insane. What they do with. I mean, you shouldn't be getting a bill for having a kid. I mean, that's weird.
That's good for America. I mean, they should just make it free for sure.
Yeah.
I mean, look, the healthcare system here, I could go on for a long time, but obviously I had a very bad experience, and just the whole way that everything is architected to just not be able to get in touch with anyone with these insurance companies. They're just like, you call for 5-6 hours, they hang up on you. And this is the last thing you want to deal with when you're going through like a health situation. But yeah.
Actually, funnily, like, I did my first company in the UK, and the welfare system is actually just extremely supportive of entrepreneurs. Like, I was like, they paid for 70% of my housing, free healthcare. And I was just like, wow, this is actually like kind of nice. I mean, it was still, obviously, you're not living in luxury lifestyle, but, as an entrepreneur, you're gonna do whatever it takes anyway. So that part is like kind of good about the UK.
I didn't sign up for those perks. Maybe I didn't get a good accountant to tell me what to do there. But yeah.
Over here, the YC is like the welfare system, or like.
Do you want to know a funny story? Is that like, so when the whole US health insurance thing was going down, I had gone to office hours at YC, and they were asking me like, we talked about the business. This is at the time of Pivot, and they'd asked me like, how are you going? Regardless, like. Told them about the whole situation with the health insurance, and it was like my partner, who's like still like the guy, my go-to at YC, Aaron Epstein. He basically said like, okay, just wait a second. Like brought in Serby, who's like the health partner, into the room. Was like, tell Serby what's going on, and Serby got in touch with like the chief medical officer of that health insurance company, and managed to like get them to like, I guess, pay attention to our case and overturn some of the decisions. And I'm so thankful for them to doing that. We still went to the UK anyway because there were some things they didn't cover. But it's crazy how like I have to go through YC to get this sorted. And like, what if you're not in the YC? Like,
Yeah.
It's the power of
That's what I'm
YC, I guess.
Yeah. That's I mean, the big value prop for these, like the venture funds. I think they feel like they add value from their connections because they can aggregate, right, all these startups demand and like kind of a market maker. So yeah, I think I've seen some podcasts with like Andreessen. I mean, they actively build these connections as a part of their value add so that you will take their money. So, and YC I'm sure does the same. Right. Otherwise, I mean, equity financing in general is actually very expensive for entrepreneurs. So it has to come with some benefits. And like for someone like you, who's a good salesperson, like you can generate your own income and revenue and stuff, right? Like, so like you have to have a good reason for working with them. I think. Yeah. So
Since you're new to Andreessen Horowitz and they funded our seed round, one thing they're really good at is connecting you to companies for like a sales perspective. And I'm sure that they sold that to you already, but I think that'll be pretty valuable to you.
We have been taking full advantage of that service. That has been very helpful indeed. Yeah.
All right, let's do the rapid fire.
which founder inspires you most these days?
Yeah, so I think the founder that inspires me most is probably Amjad from Replit. So they're a customer of ours, but like, man, that guy, talk about people that have like been working at it and like it sort of not working for a while. It's obviously been a very successful company, but like we have a front row seat to the success of our customers, and like they are just on a rocket ship now. And, you know, I have utmost respect for that. I try to emulate that level of resilience, but yeah, Amjad Nasad, I definitely think is awesome.
Which current kind of tech trend do you think is a passing fad?
I mean, I'm not going to go into like the, you know, professional side of things. Let's talk about like San Francisco fad.
Sure.
So these little electric scooter things, like that everyone's going around on, like I was a culprit of being on one of those and going in and out of work until I caught a reflection of myself in a window and I was like, what have I become? I think they need to go, these scooters. Like,
why?
They're just horrible. Like, no, firstly, they're a death trap. Like, you're gonna fall off, and like they're just these flimsy, tiny little plastic wheels. The minute there's a bit of water on the road, you're gonna slip everywhere. I'm like, you look like an absolute idiot. They need to go. That's my view on that.
I mean, there was like 3 of them that all raised like $100 million plus in 2021. So this is like 4-year-old fad.
Yeah,
that's already on the end.
The mobility stuff in the city. I'm talking more about the ones that people buy. But yeah,
sure.
You've talked about some of the most difficult parts of your journey today, but what's been the most rewarding part?
Honestly, it's been probably like, I'm not saying funding rounds are like something that, you know, mean anything really. Like it's, you know, all the hard stuff is going to be in front of me. But I do think that this funding round was really rewarding just because of everything I'd gone through in the last 2 years. And it was just like, just a short moment of like vindication. And you don't get many times in your startup journey where you like can just pause and just be like, oh yeah, we've done like quite a lot today. And I think this was just one of those moments where it was just the best feeling in the world when it was closed. And it was just, you know, sitting there with my wife and we were just like, holy hell, like this has been such a journey.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good point. I think as an entrepreneur, you're just like grinding every day and you're just like, you don't step back and say like, oh my God, like look at what we achieved, because all you see is the problems, right?
Yeah, and it's so easy to get, being completely engross you in every day. But I do think it's important sometimes to just be like, everyone at every funding round always says like, oh, it's just the beginning. It's like, I found that the most corny cliche thing. It's not just the beginning. Like, you've gone through a lot to get to this point. Just acknowledge that, like, Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, as long as you don't become complacent, but I think you're
Of
far
course.
from that. Yeah.
Well, yeah, we're not. There's no doubt about that. But yeah, you got to appreciate the small victories when they come.
Sure. All right. One last one, maybe. What's one of the most uncomfortable pieces of feedback you've received?
Yeah. So I think I sort of gave this to you before, but that time where I got completely chewed out by the CFO on that Figma prototype was pretty confronting. And yeah, I think like after that point, took that feedback on board, didn't do any more Figma prototypes. Like, yeah, we should probably start building right now. At least a demo environment. So yeah.
Yeah, that will shock you.
But that was like one out of 15 , right? Like I mean, that sounds you were doing the right thing up until then.
You did the right thing. We were doing
the right thing, but at the same time, like when you're in the meeting and they're just like, you're an idiot. It's a bit confronting.
Nicholas, do you have any questions for us? You're meeting Immad for the first time. You're building your startup. Just wondering if you have any questions before we wrap.
Immad, like with Mercury, I know that you're doing a lot of stuff globally. Well, I think obviously a lot of customer bases in US, but I think you have to deal with a lot of like cross-border payments and whatnot. Like, what's some of the biggest challenges like you guys run into on that front? I don't know if there's anything that yours. Yeah.
So we only serve US businesses, and it is, in fintech, it's really hard, right? Because you have to like if we were to launch, I don't know, in the UK, we have to do like local payment rails, local laws, and local like bank partnerships and stuff. So I don't know if you can solve all of that, you'd have done a lot. I'll give you one piece of feedback that I received when I raised 20 million at Mercury. Get a recruiter, an in-house recruiter. That was actually one of the best things we did early on. Makes a huge difference to who you can hire and the talent density at the company.
Why do you think that helps more so than having, I don't know, 2 or 3 external recruiters?
I mean, I hate external recruiters. I don't know if you've had a good experience with them, but like the incentives for an external recruiter are just completely wrong. Like they just want you to hire someone as quickly as possible. They'll send a bunch of people to you. So it creates volume, creates this urgency to hire bad people. The other thing an internal recruiter does is like, they really understand the company culture. And it's like, to me, the first line of like cultural defense is recruiters. Because people actually, I mean, maybe I'm giving away a lot here, but people behave like themselves with recruiters. Like when they think they're not being interviewed when they're talking to a recruiter. Like when they talk to me, they're like on their best behavior, but when they talk to a recruiter, they're sometimes rude and like all of these things that actually like pretty indicative of what they really like. But I think the biggest thing is really like, if you're hiring 5 engineers, right? Like an internal recruiter can go like really deep. They can go, okay, what type of engineer works? Like, oh, it turns out like, maybe we hired someone that was really good from this like college. Like, who else do they know? And like, it just works in a way that like an external recruiter will never do. And I've always had awful experience with external recruiters personally. It only makes sense once you've raised something like 20 million plus, because obviously you're just not hiring enough people to justify having someone internal.
Yeah.
But when you're ready for it, it's like a massive unlock.
I had the same experience, Immad. I just one follow-up. How do you find this person? What's kind of the spec? Because there are not that many people who are internal recruiters.
So it is a really hard spec. So I think the ideal, if you can do it, is 2 to 4 years as a contingency recruiter and then 2 to 4 years as an internal recruiter. So ideally, you find someone that's done a bit of both. Most people don't want to do recruiting long term as a career. Like they want to move into HR or they want to move into something else. So the really strong people actually don't have that many years of experience. Like I think 4-ish years of experience is like probably the kind of like level that you want to look for. And
How
then
about former
at least
headhunters?
Well, that's what contingency recruiters is. That I guess you're saying more like exec focused. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, the problem actually as a startup is like these exec focused headhunters are like getting paid so much that like it's actually probably hard to recruit them internally. The other thing is like find someone where you can say like, hey, you can run our HR/people function as well, because when you're a small team you don't really need that, and the best recruiters want to move into that often, so you can get someone really good who's like, oh, this is an opportunity for me to like do both, and there's just not that much to do in HR when it's like a sub 20-person company anyway. And then our first recruiter ended up being our VP of people when we scaled, so it worked out really well.
Is there any nuances around compensation for these types of folks? Like, do you just pay them just a regular base, or is there any sort of contingency aspect?
You can do what you want, but I hate bonuses and contingency, so I didn't do any of that. I just did a base, and there's lots of them. I mean, like living on contingency is like quite a stressful thing anyway. So I think that's like one of the things that you're offering them is like a stable job that like is not. Like recruiting is actually like the worst kind of job because it's like the first differential of everything of hiring. Like as soon as before you fire people, you stop hiring people, and therefore your recruiters don't have anything to do. So there's a lot of recruiters out there that have been like burnt a lot and have like a pretty high stress kind of job situation. So if you're like, hey, you're gonna lead our people function as well, like this is a stable job, like that's like part of what you're selling.
Yeah. I'll add one thing to that. I find the best recruiters are like amazing salespeople, and like
amazing salespeople. In fact, I think it's like the hardest sales job there is, because you're selling, like you're trying to convince someone to like give their life to a startup, which is like a really hard job.
And you're a good sales guy, Nick. So like you probably can see that in other person, but like being a great listener is like the number one aspect of being a good salesperson. So that's what you're looking for.
Yeah, this is it. It's funny you brought that up because that's literally the main thing that's our main problem right now. Is just hiring good people, especially engineers. Because we're 5 days a week in SF in office, limits the pool. But we've been thinking a lot about having internal recruiter.
Yeah, it was game changing for us. All right, maybe a good point to wrap up. This was fun, Nicholas. Thanks for joining us.
Absolutely. Congrats, man.
Thanks, everyone, for listening. Please leave us a review on whatever channel you're listening on. Makes a big difference to the algorithm and to the success of the show. And see you all next week.